prior to, but we'll get through here. My name is Craig Welch. Okay, my name is Craig Welch. I'm the executive director. The past 10 years I've been the executive director of the Portsmouth Housing Authority. I've lived in Portsmouth for 16 years with my wife and my children, and several months ago the mayor had come to me and said that we'd like to explore what it would look like to potentially build some workforce housing out of the Sherburne School, and asked me to do what we do at the Portsmouth Housing Authority and to check out some of those options. I'm sorry, to check out some of those options. Forgive me, you can keep reminding me of that. And so we went ahead and did that, and that led to a work session about the Sherburne School on January 12th, which many of you attended, but certainly not this many people. And then this neighborhood meeting today. The first thing I wanted to do, though, does anybody have kids in that? There's probably some. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to address. So the first thing I wanted to say, sincerely, is that I want to apologize for a comment that I had made at that January 12th work session became very offensive to several people, or many people at Panaway Manor. And for that, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for any offense that I made by referencing the seafood processing facility that's behind us here. And any feelings that I was saying something derogatory about the Panaway neighborhood, I really do sincerely apologize. Anybody who was offended by that, please know that that is inconsistent with the values of my life's work here, which is a core value of doing my kind of work is to treat people, all people, with dignity and respect. And to the extent that I didn't do that, with one of the comments that I made about splitting property, then I apologize. And obviously, also, if that leads to any loss in goodwill, maybe come right back on.
Can you fix that microphone?
How's that? Okay. And particularly if there was any loss in goodwill based upon what I said about this project, because we have some really serious decisions to make here about what we're going to do with the Sherburne School.
Talk into the mic.
So we knew this was a lousy room, but
Then why did you do it?
we were going to have this in a classroom. But as you see, that wasn't going to happen inside this classroom. So I am going to need to take this because I need to advance the slides this way. So this neighborhood meeting, what we're going to do is, I know there's been a lot of questions. What does this mean for you? And what does this mean for your family? And what does this mean for your neighborhood? We're going to try to address these questions today, but this is not the same presentation I gave at the January 12th meeting, and I really condensed it. I'll give you that other presentation if you'd like. Who's going to live here? We built some workforce housing units. Who is that? There's some people here, I think, from Bruce Place workforce housing that we just completed downtown, and so you can meet some of the people, but that's been a big question. What is it going to look like if we do build some housing here, some workforce housing or other housing? What is it going to look like, and how is it going to impact the streetscape and the traffic and all that kind of stuff? Why does it have to be here? We've had several people say, why are you doing it here? There's lots of other places in the city that this could be built, and I can explain that in the question and answer. Who's going to pay for it is a big question. Is this the city's going to pay for it, or the housing authority is going to pay for it, or the federal government's going to pay for it? And I can answer those questions. Who's in charge? Like, who's going to make these decisions? And who's going to make the rules about making these decisions about what's going to happen or not happen here? And then why now? This is a now thing or a later thing. So why do we want to do this now as opposed to continue to wait and what's next? Oh yeah, you can do that. Thank you. So first off, Portsmouth Housing Authority, we were founded by the city in 1953. We built a lot of housing up until between 1959 and 1973, but we have a long history of partnership with the city, not just because we were created by the city, but because the mayor appoints our board. So you have local oversight in the Portsmouth Housing Authority, and we have citizen-appointed boards. We own and operate 668 apartments in the city of Portsmouth right now, with about almost 1,000 Portsmouth citizens, 290 seniors, 250 kids in that. We've done this kind of thing before, taking old city-owned property and turning it into housing. We did that with the Atlantic Heights School in 1996, with the Lafayette School in 2010, and the Connors Cottage in 2003. Those are all seen as remarkable successes in this business. We have, the Portsmouth Housing Authority has one of the best real estate portfolios of any other housing nonprofit or authority in the state and the region. And of course, with Blue and Griffin Place, which we just opened in 2022. Okay, next slide, please. We do want to celebrate. We're talking about workforce housing. Some people say nothing ever gets done. Nothing ever gets done. We always talk about this stuff forever. Nothing ever gets done. Well, there is 64 units of brand new workforce housing that's serving people in the city of Portsmouth. Over 500 people applied for those 64 units. It was many years in the making. There are still 324 people on the wait list for workforce housing, which is evidence of the demand that we have. And just in case you're interested, the workforce there is serving local nonprofits, hair salons, grocery stores, jewelry stores, hotels. We have 7 city employees that are actually living there, and 4 from the school department and 6 restaurants. And hopefully you'll be able to meet some of the folks today. And you know what, if you don't meet any of the folks today and you still want to, you can all come over to our house and we'll have an open house for you at Bruce Place so you can see what we've done there and meet some of those folks. Besides workforce housing, the PHA also provides senior-only housing. Those properties that I mentioned are senior-only housing. They're exclusive for people 62 years of age and older. We have 60 of those units. And the public housing that we built between 1959 and 1973. That's Marston, Feaster, Woodbury, State Street, and Pleasant Street, and Godson Meadows. Non-PHA housing, so what we don't do is build market rate housing. We don't have any home ownership programs or home ownership units. We don't have condos. We don't do any specialized or service supported housing. So we are landlords primarily. We have a lot of resident services and a lot of things that we do for the people who live with us, but we don't have any specialized housing for certain populations other than senior housing. We don't do transitional housing. We're not a shelter. All of ours is independent living and apartments, rental apartments. This is a long definition. A lot of people, we talk a lot about definitions, and definitions, I think, end up slowing the conversation down when we're talking about workforce housing, or affordable housing, or Section 8 housing, what's low-income housing, what are all these things that we're always talking about, and how are those defined? This is, if you go to nhhfa.org, the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is the authority on affordable housing in New Hampshire, and they define it there. You can also Google, there's lots of different definitions of workforce housing. Some of them are in code because there's some regulatory components to it, but workforce housing serves people in the community who can't otherwise afford the market rents. Specifically, people talk about income, like who's going to live here, who decides who you want living here and who you don't want living here. But for the tax credit financed housing, in a single person household, they're going to be between $40,000 and $65,000 a year. 2-person, you can see that, and a 3-person household up to $83,000 a year. So there's a lot of folks in Portsmouth. The biggest demand of housing going forward is going to be for people who are making under 80% of the area median income and below, and that's what those numbers are. The rents, this is what's happening down at Bruce Place. Right now, we don't have any 3-bedroom units. We just have 1- and 2-bedroom units, and those are the rents as of right now, except for that last line. We can push the rents higher if we go to a higher income category. So that's the maximum rent. If the building here were placed in service in 2022, those would be the rents today. And that's what it is at Bruce Place. Lots of challenges to do housing here, but lots of great opportunities. There always is a scarcity of funding sources with this. There's just not a lot of capital resources in New Hampshire to build affordable housing. That's one reason why we're 20 to 30,000 units short in our affordable workforce housing in the state. The speed to market is a challenge. Now, one reason why we've suggested the time frame that we have is because you can apply for federal low-income housing tax credits once per year, and that application is due in August. In order for us to have a successful application that could bring as much as $8 million to this project, then we need to have permits in hand. And so if we don't have permits in hand by then we just go out another year, which is not a big deal, but it is a big deal for the people who need more housing. And one reason why we're 20 to 30,000 units short is because this stuff takes so long to do, and it doesn't need to. Cost allocations become difficult about different things, and then trying to do some excellent design that's cost effective. Who pays for it? Just briefly, PHA, we're a special purpose government agency. We don't get any funding from the city. We survive on rental incomes and some federal contracts with HUD. And so that's what we do. We can put together a capital stack that can build more housing. And if there were other uses on the site for other housing uses other than workforce housing or the housing that we provide, then that would be provided by others. Or if the city wanted to, or anybody wanted to do a recreational use or any other kinds of uses here at the facility or on the grounds, then those could be paid for by others. We can skip over this. This is a capital stack for how we put these things together. We can skip over that. And this is what I was talking about before. To get land use permits in hand by August 30th of this year, then we will be leasing up new workforce housing in Portsmouth in the fall of 2025. This has become a primary goal of the mayor and this council, and PHA is standing by, ready to do it and ready to execute on this kind of timeline. We'll pay for all of the pre-development costs and everything associated with that, and then in order to do our next project. These are just a couple of the conceptual designs. We have done some due diligence so far with environmental site assessments, and we're getting ready for some geotech. We've got a civil engineer working on a traffic study and some sound mitigation. This is one of many, many options that we could do, but we did want to show you something today about what some housing could look like on the site. A couple of different buildings that's envisioned in a couple of 40-unit phases, and then 8 townhomes as part of that. We can show the next one. And here's another one that anticipates, I think, 88 units, and this between townhomes and the building and back. We advised the city at the January 12th session that we think we could fit as many as 160 units on the site. If you look at what a site plan looks like at 160 units, pretty much the whole site is paved. And that's more density, more traffic than I think we should have at the site. So our expectations have been scaled down about that to something that's more workable here. And that was the fastest I could go with all that, and I know there's a ton of other questions, but I want to hand it back to the mayor so he can start with other questions.
Thank you, Craig. All right. If you are a Greenway resident, raise your hand. I see one. Eric Anderson. Oh, over there. I just looked right in front of me. So we'll come, and again, 3 minutes. It's deceptively hard to keep this microphone right here, but nobody can hear you if you don't.
Can I ask just a quick question? Craig just said they've already scaled down the number. I think if you could share what that expected number is, it might help with the discussion here.
Sure, Craig, what was the number that we had, or scaled down, those two things that you showed up there?
When we spoke at that January, we were asked what was possible on the site. In our initial evaluation, we thought we could fit as 160 units on this piece of land. If it were the same density, if we did a project here that was the same density as what we did downtown, it would be 365 units on the site. So that's not going to happening here. It depends on the, there's a process in which we can narrow this down, but we think that 160 units was too dense of a use because of the parking requirements on that. So we developed a plan that's more like 80 or 100 that we think is more doable.
Short answer, what you saw up there, 80 to 100 units. Was that helpful?
Thank you for answering.
Thanks. Thanks. And you're also, just one more thing. So there's a microphone underneath because we're recording this and putting up, so just notice there's also another microphone right there, so just don't cover that.
Here, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I've given copies. I have written copies, and I've given them to the mayor so he can pass it out.
Bring the mic closer.
So he can pass it out to other council members. I don't expect complete answers to the questions I'm going to present, but would welcome any response from anybody on the issues that I think are most important for this. My name is Eric Anderson. I'm a 38-year resident of Peanaway Manor. My wife was born in Peanaway, and her family has been here for 75 years. I like to say we're vested in, and we have tenure in this wonderful neighborhood, and it's the discussion here tonight. This past Saturday, my wife and I walked through Peanaway, Holly Lane, and Golterville, distributing announcements of this meeting. We distributed 160 announcements, and leaving publicly behind 20 or 25 residents or homes. That establishes the number of homes in our community and later referenced in these comments. This site, when vacated by Lister Academy, should have an immediate use. The empty time between its use as Sherman School and Lister Academy was maintenance costly to this building, even with moderate remedy, but it's still structurally sound. This building is a signature and historical component of this neighborhood and should not be demolished with development of any type. Today, there has been little diversity or discussion or investigation of what will be done with this site. The mere simple question should be, what's the best use of this site for the city, financial or otherwise, with the least impact to the neighborhood community? In opinion, I do not think the council has vested much time in the possible uses. Could this site be could be a police station? We've got a $40 million project that has been designated, that's in the city. Can this be a police station? Can it satisfy more senior housing needs? And I'd like to see the council discuss this a little bit more. I'd like to see the council discuss this a little bit more, rather than just race into some of the discussion that's being presented tonight. Along with you, the City Council, Portsmouth Housing Authority is here this evening, and I've distributed my written comments to members of that board. And I would hope that sometime the issues I expressed can be addressed. PHA cites a possible 80 to 160 housing units. 80 units is approximately half of what the community now is, and 160 is double. How can this not have an impact of reasonable proportion? What is the arrangement in deeded ownership of the property between the city and PHA? Is this a public-private partnership? Is there any financial profit component to any arrangement in this issue? How many variances would be required for any housing project of this proportion? Is there any taxable income revenue component to the city in this city PHA arrangement? What kind of traffic impact, and I think I'll leave that lightly here. We know that Liberty Mutual is closing its facilities and there's potential of not 3,000, but a component of the 3,000 employees coming to Portsmouth. If there is not a traffic study or a consequence to that in combination with any housing units that are created here, I think there's a negative, there's concern for a traffic study. What is the prospect of the 80 or 160 housing units in density and mass?
Raise it up, Eric.
What is the potential, what's a prospective 80 to 160 units, and how much density and massing will be required within the 5-acre site that will be most likely not beyond the current residential texture of this neighborhood? It has been influenced that 4 stories and more would achieve the desired units. As the PHA director, which is Mr. Welch has stated, there's been some prospect of a mixed-use application, and we would like to know a little bit more what that mixed-use component would entail. Mr. Welch has stated that a berm for a sound barrier could be used, and I think a little bit more investigation of that, as there is regulatory requirements either through the state or the feds that there would have to be a fixed fence sound barrier installed, and who's going to pay for that cost. What type of maintenance program will be guaranteed to any housing application so that to avoid any deferred maintenance or deterioration of any housing units that are installed here. And can you define, and I think you have defined the categories of housing within the domain of PHA, and what category would apply to any housing in Sherman? And could this category change in time to a lesser classification? It's been expressed that your work session at Gather and Haven has established their interest and desire to come to be a tenant at Sherman. How much of a physical footprint would they require if considered? And it's not with any malice to their mission and purpose, but are they the right type of mixed-use tenant? Would they bring operational components or additional downside traffic circumstances? I think we have to understand, does this one 5-acre site, is it going to cure all the social ills of this region? And I think that's a question that has to be addressed. There have been instances where federal housing authority, less than market rate housing turns into full market rate housing after a particular amount of time. I think there should be an answer and some explanation to the public on this. And could PHA explain their urgency in their timeline in context to the city's timeline? And then one other, in closing here, no matter what the conclusion of what results out of this project, I would like, in my opinion, that the name of anything stays as Sherman. The name Sherman is just as synonymous as this historical signature of this location. In closing, I offer the insight, and that's been a result of my experiences. The unknown breeds fear, objection, and distrust, and thus making transparency and public engagement the goal to achieve. At this moment, this issue is a long way to go to meet those needs of transparency and engagement. Just do it right. Thank you.
there was a lot of questions in there. So, Craig, if you want to take a stab at this, as I'm standing here, it makes sense to put these up on city website and not under the workforce housing, but under disposition of the Sherburne School, which will happen at some point when Lister Academy moves to the community campus, to be able to list answers to these questions as we can. One thing that I wanted to answer on the building right here, the plans so far are from behind the building and not this building here. There's nothing that's been decided. I share your opinion that we shouldn't knock it down. Love the charm that this is, and it's tough to imagine this neighborhood without this building. It's a much prettier building, it pains me to say it, than New Franklin School. But I would, shed a tear if New Franklin were to come down, and I know that like you, or like me to New Franklin, many people are committed and have a strong sense of community when you see that building. What goes in this building is a longer process. I understand the timeline, trying not to leave it vacant, but we haven't even begun those conversations. So far, it's been what goes behind the building. So I'm not trying to punt on any of the other questions. Craig, were there answers to any of those that you want to? Okay, maybe by 11:30 tonight, when we're still here, we'll get through that. And honestly, if there are questions that you have, many of you have emailed the council, but if there are questions that you have, feel free to email us. We try to respond to everyone that we get, especially around this. Like if it's an outdoor dining, yay or nay, sometimes we file that away as, we get maybe hundreds of those. But if there are specific questions like Eric's, 12 points down there, we'd love to have those as soon as possible. All right, so I didn't look over here first for a question. Okay? We'll go to... So you just have to talk into it.
Okay. I'm Lindsay Lewis. I live on Decatur, and we've lived there for 18 years. We have 3 school-age children that go to New Franklin and the middle school, and I'm also a second grade teacher at New Franklin. But for 15 years, I commuted to Northampton School and worked at that school. And my main question is, what research have you done? What studies have you done to see what kind of impact this will have in our school system? Currently, New Franklin is full. We have teachers working with students in closets. I'm passionate about this, obviously, but I see the full classrooms. I see the struggling students from some of our neighborhoods, and I see all the housing that has gone up in Portsmouth over the past few years and the number of children we have in our schools, and I'm concerned for our kids, I'm concerned for the neighborhood kids, I'm concerned for my students in this town. And whether it's low-income housing or affordable housing or not affordable housing, it's the number of children that we're bringing in. What do we want for our children in our schools, and what kind of, we pride ourselves on a strong school system and top in the state. But we can only sustain so much, and so I just fear for our children that we are putting too many people in this town, and when does, the bubble burst?
Now, Superintendent McLaughlin very surreptitiously scheduled a meeting for this exact time tonight, so unfortunately he can't be here. The redistricting question I've gotten a lot, like what happens right now, and I can't speak to what the school board does. Little Harbor is probably the school with the most amount of room. Don Darrow, the school with the least amount of room, but my kids go to Franklin, or one does right now. Big day for her. She got glasses. I was hoping that she would avoid that like her dad, but unfortunately she has glasses and is just the cutest little nerd in the world. But she goes to kindergarten there. Personally, as a dad, I'm not going to let something happen that's going to make her experience, not just because I went to New Franklin or she goes to New Franklin, but what has been built up around the community in New Franklin is great, and truly something special, something that's really important to me. But in terms of redistricting, from what Zach has stated, Dondero is the school that is the most overcrowded right now, and if you were to lob it off, it would go to Little Harbor. Obviously, those are much longer conversations.
More questions.
Okay. Big.
My name is Peter Officer. I'm a resident of Colonial Drive in the Panaway Manor neighborhood, aka Portsmouth's Forgotten neighborhood. I live there with my wife Krista, our 2-year-old daughter, and our daughter attends the Seacoast Community School, daycare and preschool, which educates children from infancy to 4 years old. It's located at the community campus. You might be wondering why I'm mentioning this, but it's because that's where the Robert Lister kids are planning to be moved so that this project can get underway. I'm here tonight as a concerned neighbor and father, as well as a frustrated citizen of Portsmouth, and embarrassingly so, a voter of yours, Mr. Mayor. We have been told that part of the goal of tonight's discussion was for us, as neighbors, to have the opportunity to ask questions, but also propose alternative ideas. I have several of both. However, before I get to my ideas, I want to have my questions addressed first. My first question that I have is, what exactly is City Council's role in this project? Based on the comments made by you, Mr. Mayor, and various news articles and social media posts, City Council is saying that this project would be exclusively for the workforce of Portsmouth, which directly contradicts what the PHA has proposed. During their proposal, the PHA stated that the goal of this project would be a first-of-its-kind mixed-use village of workforce, low-income, and service-supported housing. So, Mr. PHA, I'm glad that you did a presentation, but I'm sad to see it different from your original. But as I understand, from the 1/12/23 meeting and neighborhood discussions with Josh, Rich, and John from council, the PHA is a private, non-profit that is separate from the city. They will be moving forward on an application for grant money and funding separately from the city to develop on the Lister Academy lot where we all are tonight. Then, based on whatever funding they receive, that would then dictate the exact type of housing they are funded to build. Rich, John, and Josh all said that the city council would have no say in who exactly qualifies to live in the PHA's project, as it would be owned and run by the PHA, not the city. Mr. Mayor, Rich, Josh, John, how can you and other city officials say in published articles in Seacoast Online, or post on social media, or say to constituents that this project will be exclusively for workforce housing, when that is not what the PHA has proposed, or what the PHA will be exclusively applying for? And I say exclusively applying for. Will you commit, Mr. Mayor, John, Josh, Craig, that you will not vote to confirm anything other than workforce housing? We've heard Mr. Mayor say workforce housing, but yet there was one definition given. And I've also heard from Rich and from some others that, hey, there's no real definition we can give to this. So I'm wondering, is that definition that was given tonight the specific definition that is in the grant that you are applying for? Are there income minimums and maximums for the grant that the PHA is applying for? Do people who qualify for workforce housing have to prove that they live in Portsmouth? Again, to preserve the workforce of Portsmouth. Also brought up in the original meeting was the proximity to 95 and C&J and other luxuries, I guess you could call them, that would support the commuting force for this project. If it's the workforce of Portsmouth, why should we be concerned about gateways out of Portsmouth? Regarding the size of the project. Who determines the size of the project? We have heard 80 to 160 units. That was original. Tonight, a lower number, but still not great. And we've received no information on how that number was determined. Who came up with it? And who ultimately makes the decision? Is it the PHA that's applying for as much grant money to support the biggest and most expansive project they can build? And then depending on how much grant money they receive, is that what will determine the size? Of the grants that the PHA is applying for, how much of the grant money will be exclusively for workforce housing instead of low income or service supported? Has anyone from the city council seen the grants that they're applying for? Or can share the names of the grants so that we as educated citizens can also look into the details? Are conversations like the one tonight actually going to impact the conversation on size? Are we trying to match the neighborhood as we've heard in private conversations? And is that something that the PHA is worried about? If so, why propose 2 4-story buildings, among others, when nothing, even next to the fish stick factory, is even 4 stories? My third question is regarding the timeline and the misinformation that we as citizens seem to have fallen victim to at the hands of both the City Council and the PHA. March 2022, the city purchases community campus. The city begins discussions with the Lister Academy to discuss and ultimately decide on moving the students, faculty and staff of RLA to the community campus. Same building as the daycare of infants to 4-year-olds. The PHA hires civil engineers and architects to begin their work for the proposal. The PHA coordinates time with the city council to schedule time during a council meeting where a large portion of time will be given to the PHA to present their proposal. The meeting is then set for 1/12/23, and the only questions that came from council were, how can we help to push this along as fast as possible? There were no questions as if they were thinking about the citizens that live in the neighborhood, or thinking as citizens that were, hey, what if this was going on in my neighborhood? Wouldn't they be curious? And I'm not trying to sound like a not in my backyard guy, but surely we all have questions. The fact is, nobody asked any questions aside from, how can we rush? So within the last year, you have worked to empty the building, this building, by putting adolescents at risk due to behavioral and emotional challenges in the same building as babies. Then claiming that that building is vacant, decrepit, and one step away from being condemned and needs to be developed now. And we'll be working hand in hand with the PHA, who, according to their own study, I heard a question about a study, there's one study that was referenced, and it was the PHA study, according to their own study, has outlined the need for such a project. And again, need to rush this along as soon as possible, and along the way, intentionally misleading the community. Lastly, before I get into my ideas, and I do have some ideas as to what we could use for this property, I have one more question. When you ask for alternative ideas, what is the next step to make sure that any ideas for alternatives get recognized as an official proposal? It seems to me that the PHA is the only proposal on the table. Are there ideas that tonight maybe will come across that would count as proposals? Are the ideas tonight count as proposals? I'd assume not. I'm glad to see that we're recording. Again, possibly some more misinformation. We were told it wouldn't be recorded, but I'm glad that it is. Because I'm wondering, for the ideas tonight, what it will take for our ideas to be recognized as formal proposals. Will you as City Council take them forward? Will you fight on our behalf to voice our concerns, our ideas, our proposals? Or is it up to us as individuals? If it's up to us as individuals, I would argue that we're up against it because we're up against a private entity that has already spent thousands of dollars to make sure that this project goes through. So I'm wondering if this is a check the box to say that we've met with people, or if your ears are truly open. If your ears are truly open, I really want to understand what the next steps will be to make sure that what you hear tonight makes it to the next City Council. Because I'll be there. And I want to make sure that some of the ideas that are discussed with my neighbors make it to your ears and to discussion further. Thanks for the time. I'm glad.
There were some questions discussing what the income affordability of that would be when that would go. Just, I guess, one thing on the Robert Lister Academy, the purchase of community campus. This building, we were told, $3 to $8 million to bring up to code in terms of, not code, but in terms of what would be expected there. It's the long-term strategic mission to support some of the nonprofits that are out on community campus, also take on 3 to 4 acres. This was an opportunity to move that over there. And that came up before any discussions around what would happen here. Second, on your ideas, I'd love to hear folks and what their ideas for this building right here. What we're talking about in terms of housing is behind the building. And so if there are big ideas for what this neighborhood wants to see in this building, we'd love to hear all of them. You know, it's helpful if there's ideas that are
Let
organized.
Craig answer.
What's that?
Let Craig answer.
Yeah, I mean, look at Mark. You know, I appreciate your outspokenness and also your science, but I just want to get through the answer to this question.
What's your role in this project?
Our role is ultimately to approve or not approve the project.
You have no say in this.
No, so in terms of, so this is a correct question in terms of the grants that you can apply for, and good segue to the correct answer.
Great. So now.
Peter, there was a lot of questions in what you said, and I can answer, or try to answer all of them, but I don't know that this is makes me the place to do it. Or even outside of a council meeting. What's important to me, Peter, and
I think this would be the place because we're all here tonight, so
Agreed.
we'd like to.
so do you want, I tried to write down a lot of stuff, you have a lot of stuff, I don't know where you want me to start.
There you go.
So I think around the grants,
Okay, so financing housing under the federal low-income housing tax credit program. Tax credits is considered, is what we get for equity, right? So there's debt and then there's equity. The federal tax credits allow us to raise, it should be between, for Bruce Place it was about $7.5 million to build the project, and that's why we can build it and keep it affordable to people. It usually is, you know, that capital stack, it's usually not enough to just use those credits, so we end up with some private debt, like from banks, some debt from public organizations like the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. We also had a grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, which was an interest rate subsidy buy down, and then also a $500,000 grant, and it was actually Bank-Prov locally that bought all of these federal low-income housing tax credits. There's a lot of complexity in how those credits work in terms of how they're used as a financial instrument. So yes, I think going into another question is that the legal entity that ends up owning property, for instance, Lafayette School is a city-owned property. It's leased by the Lafayette School Senior Housing Partnership. So they're set up as separate LLCs, of which the limited partner is the tax credit investor, and the general partner is us as a nonprofit. I can go on that. Is that
Maybe touch on. Make them available so that we can see what the grants are, who qualifies, what you're applying for, and so that we can, as educated residents of this neighborhood, truly understand the impact that you're applying for the development. Can you make those public?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Just give us links. Just give us links so that we can read.
Okay, and the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is a great source for all of this information at the website that I gave you, and we can certainly show you what we did in the past one. The other ones were before my time, but the capital stack is a little different on every one. And there's different, it's complex to manage it because there's different regulatory requirements between each one. Does that answer your question?
One main question is, what's been said by the mayor, what's been said by council, is this would be exclusively workforce housing. Are you applying for any grants for any other type of housing other than workforce as defined in the
We don't know what other housing we would build, but if there was a,
Any other types?
well, there's other types of housing, there's other, no. We haven't applied for anything, so we haven't applied for anything. All right.
Craig, I think the question is, will the grant define the demographic of the population that would be eligible for the housing?
The income demographic?
Any of it, whether it's low income, if it's Section 8, if it's workforce, like will the grant have the definition of the demographic that will populate the space?
The income definition, yes.
So I think, Greg, what they're,
What's being built, she's talking about.
so, Greg, so,
No, because
Yeah.
the question is who's coming into the neighborhood?
yeah.
Like,
Oh, okay.
We make it workforce housing permanent.
Right.
we're kind of just thrown out a really big net.
Right. There are a lot of housing needs in Portsmouth, right? So there's people who do have some needs, and there's other groups that are going to propose different as part of this whole process, right? So I know Haven is interested in, pardon me? It's called Haven. I've talked to lots of other nonprofits, make it into a music school or a daycare center or some other kind of use. There's a group here that has kids with developmental and intellectual disabilities who is interested in housing. So I'm not sure who should be excluded or included, but right now, what we're proposing and what we've envisioned from the very beginning is workforce housing, like what we have downtown at Roost Place. All of our housing portfolio that we own and manage now, or that we own now, is we have a preference for Portsmouth residents. Okay, so we have 800 people on our wait list of Portsmouth housing. They're all on different wait lists because we have 12 different properties that we manage. And for Bruce Place is the only one that doesn't have a subsidy, right? So you have to pay all the rent. You have to have some income to pay all the rent. This is what we're envisioning. This is what the mayor wanted. This is what we're envisioning for this property is for, tax credit finance, affordable housing. Workforce, what do you want to call it? Workforce housing or low income housing or affordable workforce housing or...
No.
Yes. This is not a Section 8. Pardon me? As a Portsmouth Housing Authority, we're never going to tell somebody no. We're never going to exclude people with vouchers.
Yes or no answer. If you build this project in here, are you going to allow Section 8 people into this house?
People with a portable Section 8 voucher, yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's what workforce housing, yes. Yeah.
No, you can't, sorry, I get it. You could probably talk loud enough, but you're not going to depict them as a good support.
My name is Michelle Scott. I've been in the neighborhood almost 30 years. I've been in social services about 40 years. So I'm real familiar with what subsidized housing does to communities and to the people who live in the subsidized housing. It's stigmatizing oftentimes.
Speak into the mic.
So I'm just interested to know, you seem to think that this isn't going to impact our neighborhood. We have a wonderful neighborhood. And 300 people, I mean, potentially, there could be hundreds of people in our neighborhood with needs. If you're talking about bringing an agency like Haven or something like that, obviously these people have needs. And I don't see how the impact is going to be positive for us. And I applaud you for trying to deal with this very difficult issue. These are complicated issues and difficult. Personally, I don't like segregated housing. It's just not, I don't think it works well. I think it works better when people are integrated into communities through rental subsidies and vouchers, those kinds of things. But I don't think you've spoken to our concerns about our property values, and I'm sure most people here are owners of property, and it's their major investment. We are already hindered by the noise and the fumes of 95 and the airport. So now you're talking about putting subsidized housing at the entrance of our neighborhood. So I think you need to talk more about why that's a good idea, because I'm not seeing it. I'm not excited.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, yep. You got a t-shirt.
Yes, I do. I'm an owner of a home in Hanaway for 26 years.
Yeah, I will make sure, but you can hear my voice.
I can, but the...
You already know, I don't want to hear from you, I'm here to talk to the people. What I was wondering, first of all, as you opened with those nice pictures and you showed us gladly, you know, we were the fried fish fillets there, and that you told, I don't accept your apology. You would never have apologized to us unless I mentioned it. But my question to you about workforce housing, why haven't you considered using the 14 acres of land that you just bought in the city of Portsmouth for community campus? Why don't you just move on up there? I'm sure you can get a great traffic study up there. I want you to tell me, how are you going to get 3,000 people that are coming into Liberty Mutual, exiting Liberty Mutual, and then you have us coming out of Panaway. You have 33 people trying to get in and out of Panaway, and it's only one way. We're stuck in there. We can't get out. We can't get out at all. So I just want to ask you, have you considered that 14-acre property up there? That would be a beautiful place for work. I'm not against workforce housing. I don't trust any of you. I think you're pushing this through. You can smile that cocky little smile all you want, Crystal.
Right.
She has a number,
Families, these people have loved ones. These people have children that are going to go to school. My son went to New Franklin School. It was overcrowded back then. This lovely teacher here, thank you for being a teacher. She's been there. I was a para for 15 years for the city of Portsmouth. I know what it's like, and I know what people. I love my job. So I think you people should reconsider moving this stupid-ass project and stop blowing smoke up our ass.
I appreciate the passion. I would simply ask that you be as polite as possible. Yes, I understand. The question was, why can't we do the community campus? Craig, do you want to speak?
Yeah, let's do that too. Some people think that housing should be segregated to certain areas and not certain areas, but certainly we believe that housing should be everywhere. Whether, no matter what kind of communities that we all already have workforce housing and stuff in our communities, but I think that it should be everywhere. And I think community campus would be a great place. There's some city-owned land in Atlantic Heights that I think would be great. There's some on Granite Street that I think would be great. There's all kinds of opportunities in Portsmouth. Our own housing, we just built a parking lot that we already had. That made a lot of sense. Gaza Meadows could be developed or redeveloped in certain ways. So there's lots of opportunities to do this in Portsmouth, and including this one. So.
Right, where do you live?
South Street.
Would you allow us to wear something?
Oh, you're damn right I would.
Yeah, right. I believe you.
Hey guys.
Good evening, council and neighbors. My wife Jennifer today. I just have 3 quick questions. For me, it was the shock and surprise of this project. You know, like if Sue and Betty, 4 houses away, or a block away, want to build a chicken coop in my neighborhood, there's an official letter that comes and says, Sue and Betty want to build a chicken coop. And Bob and Betty on the next street want to build, you know, in addition to their home, I get an official letter from the city saying, we're building, come to a hearing, right up front before it's even, you know, pictures and drawings. So for me, I find, when I heard about this kind of under the radar, just 2 weeks ago, it was the day after the hearing, an hour and 14 minutes in, I think like a lot of people we were shocked because to have pictures, planning, this has been in the works for a long time. And I get why. I really understand we do need some housing. But I think it's kind of the covert sort of, it feels sneaky, which to me, I'm not a college educated guy, but to me, it's, the feeling is, if it's sneaky, it's going to be sneaky all the way through. The way the world is today, it's just, we needed a clear path to this day one. Like when you came to you, that's when it should have been announced. Because news or something talking about it, not when we're like August breaking ground. You know what I mean? It just doesn't feel right. My second question is, and I know this is a silly question, but will pets be allowed in these apartments? Okay, so where are they going to get walked? On the pavement of the apartment complex or in our neighborhood? And I've been living here for 12 years. I've seen, because there's so many police and fire people and nurses in our neighborhood, there's no patrol. I think I've seen 2 patrol cars in 12 years, but we don't really need it. But who's going to patrol to make sure that people are picking up their dog doing? You know what I mean? And if it could be as many as 70 pets coming through our neighborhood. That sounds nuts, but those are the little things that down the road lowers our quality of life. And if this does go through, which I'm sure it's going to, so one way or another, can the people here tonight, can we be the ones to decide what the name's going to be? Can we be the ones that's, together say, hey, Panaway Village, not the name of some famous person from Portsmouth?
Thanks, Steve. Go behind you. Just on when we get to a point of having a conversation, this is not, I would say, right here at least, too sneaky. We got the whole neighborhood here listening to the whole neighborhood. We put signs, some councilors knocked on doors, your neighbors have knocked on doors. This, in order to see whether or not it's a project that's worth pursuing, there's some studies that have to happen before that. In terms of land, in terms of site work and whether or not this is going to be, traffic studies still have to go on. But there has to be some work to go into seeing if this is viable to get people, I would say, almost universally ticked off, and to see if is this something that we can do. And then we wanted to talk to you and hear from you. And I can assure you, and there's folks in here that like me, there's folks that I've lost the vote. What's that? Yeah, I know. And we're going to hear from the people, but I'm explaining, the question was, why is this here happening when it's already a done deal? It's not a done deal. 2, it has to go through all this effort to get everybody out here to talk about it. It has to know that there's some links to it, to be able to good site selection, a good spot for building housing. Now, if it's a good spot for the neighborhood, I would say that is leaning, in terms of it's leaning to no, based on the clapping and the comments tonight. But we're here to listen and to hopefully make any project, because there's going to be a project at the Sherman. We're not just going to let a building fall into the earth in the city of Portsmouth. We either move off of the property, we sell it, private developer, something happens, but the city of Portsmouth isn't going to watch a building simply collapse. And so we have to figure out what to do next, and that's why we're here tonight. So I appreciate Steve, it's good to see you again, and remember you answered the door when I was knocking on Super Bowl Sunday, so appreciate that.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, I live at 700 Colonial Drive. My name is Missy Hathaway, and I am all for workforce housing, probably as much as PHA. I employ 47 people in the restaurant business in the off-season. During the on-season, about 80. I help the girls fill out their applications for Ruth Griffin. I also encourage my son, who got accepted when he just is a veteran from the Army, he just got home. I said, get into that building, get downtown, get a job when you get home. He got in, decided to come home, which I want him to. But I am all about workforce housing. I believe it's a need we have, and I'm not the person to say not in my backyard. That I'm just concerned with, like Steve is, I don't know you, but you have so many points that just came out of my head. I'm just concerned at the speed of this. Why are we not using the Jones Ave property? Why are we not, I know there's property by Sweaterville. There's a lot of Portsmouth property that we don't all know about that could be used. I also went to Lafayette School when I was a kid. I didn't go to Sherburne. I've lived here for 20-something years, but I grew up on Middle Street. That Lafayette School building is beautiful. I think that's a great, it's 10 units, did you say? 10 units? That's a great spot. We need our softball field. There's a lot of reasons why this is not a great spot, and other spots are great spots. And then, the Ruth Griffin situation. I love Ruth. The building is beautiful, like beautiful. There's a lot of problems there. I don't know if you know that. I have 3 employees that live there. There are a lot of problems. Why are we rushing to get this job done so quickly? She can't use her stove, there's electrical, I don't even want to get going. There's a lot. I'm glad my son didn't move in there. So I'm just curious why, like Steve said, it just seems a little too quick. And I do believe we need it, though. I'm not against it.
Hello. All right, I'm a little nervous. So my name is Lauren Kranz. I live down the street on Plains Ave. I don't know where Plains Ave is. But I commute to Rochester every day, and I will say I'm no civil engineer, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that it's really crowded out here. And when I'm trying to get my kids to daycare and come home, I mean, you're sitting in a lot of traffic, that little bottleneck right there. Also, I don't want to forget that not everyone is here tonight. I'm a mom of 2 kids under 5. My husband works nights. I had to beg, borrow, and plead to get somebody to come watch my kids tonight. So if there's people with little kids, they're probably not here tonight. And I applaud the mom and dad who were here earlier with their little kid. But that's not true. Not everyone's here tonight. And then the last thing, at the risk of sounding super naive, I work in recreation. Outdoor space is important. I actually don't know the answer, but does this have to be developed? Has there been any talk about just keeping some open space? We can never go back. Once we go back. Has it even been considered to just not build on it? Is that a silly question? But do we have to build on it? I'm genuinely asking, do we have to build it? Yeah, can we keep the existing green space or look to enhance the green space? Because, look behind Calvary. I know that was private land and a private purchase, but that's gone. We can never get that back. So is that what's going to happen every time we open land? It's a unique opportunity for the city. Maybe we should think about keeping it open. Just my humble opinion.
Good evening. Bill St. Laurent, 253 Colonial, been here 55 years.
Put it up to your mouth, Bill.
Sorry. Fantastic neighborhood. I know one thing, if I'd have known something like this was going in, I would have fought tooth and nail to keep the school so that wouldn't happen. But anyway, before we lose the room, and we are starting to lose the room, I wonder if it's possible if we could get our hands up about people who object to this project. I mean, everybody's not going to be able to speak, so we got a full house here that
5 voters in my house.
that doesn't really care to have this project in there. And talking about the project, there's nothing out here. You put low-rent housing or workforce housing near malls or places where they can, because a lot of them don't have cars. And they walk there, like Gosling Meadows. They walk across and go to the supermarket. There's nothing out here. They want to get a gas station down the street down here. Other than that, I don't see the need of using this lot. First of all, as was kind of mentioned why not have an athletic center here? They're always looking for athletic centers, and this housing project would be great by the campus, the community campus. We got a lot of land over there. One thing I'm going to really fight if you put that is you're not going to get that gate open. No. Very big possibility. That would be the worst thing to open that road, because we've had a lot of safety without and privacy out here that we deserve to have that constantly, because neighborhood to neighborhood, people can get hurt. Now, I'm wondering why we're the only city in the area that has either workforce housing or low-rent housing.
Bring the mic to your
What's the
mouth.
difference between workforce housing and low-rent?
Bring it to your mouth,
We have
Bill.
Wamasett, we have Gosling Meadows, we have, I can't read my. Spinnaker Point, we have lots and lots of senior housing. Why are we there's Dover, there's Kittery, why are we the only one? Are we the low rent projects of the community in the seacoast? Let's take it easy here. You're going to lock us into our neighborhood with traffic, and like I said, you're not getting that gate open. I'll lay there. I won't be around much longer, but I want to keep it for you young people that are in here. So, other than that, I am completely against it. I don't know how many are. We don't need these big, tall buildings. If you go down on the highway, you're looking up, well, those buildings are going to be huge. They're going to look like monsters. We just don't need this in here. It's too tight a neighborhood, and this is too tight a spot to be putting this something. Now we've got, like everybody's talking about, Liberty Mutual coming back, and we got one way out. Please don't take this off the agenda totally.
You're right next, I promise. I have a couple of things. I have two passions. One is Portsmouth. I've been here for almost 30 years. The other is housing. I've spent the last 30 years of my life as a director for housing in York, the town of York. We've most recently just built a workforce project. We have 45 units that we leased up in 7 weeks. We are now just had an approval for another 45 units on a 6 acre lot. The distinction between low-income housing and workforce housing is, if you can imagine, when you were young, you used to be able to just go out and get an apartment. You didn't need help, you could pay for it on your own, and you didn't need a subsidy to do it. The one criteria for workforce housing is that one member of the household needs to be full-time employed, and that's the difference. These people are gone during the day, they drive, they have cars, they are your kids, they are your families, they are, my son came home from the military and couldn't live in Portsmouth because he couldn't afford it. I want my kids to live here, I want my grandkids to live here, and it has to be a compatible agreement between what you want for your neighborhood and what we need as a community. We truly need workforce housing in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Promise.
Hi, my name is Shasta O'Connell. I live on Holly Lane. I agree with the fact that we need housing, and I support that too. I think we need to figure out exactly how many units we can withstand within this neighborhood. Back in 2021, I had contacted the Traffic and Safety Committee, and we did a traffic study on our road. Within 5 days, something crazy like 8,000 vehicles just passed on Sherburne Road. We live in a 20-mile-per-hour area, like that road is 20 miles per hour. We clock vehicles going 63 on that road. So thank you for mentioning the gate, because one way in, one way out, we all kind of see this coming, where this is going to go. That gate's going to be open, and now we're living on a crazy busy road. That's scary. That's really scary. One of the things that attracted us to this neighborhood was the fact that our kids can ride their bikes. They can't do that on Woodbury Ave. They can't do that in many roads in our town because it's just not safe. So, while I understand we need housing, we also need to be respectful that this is a neighborhood. And there are a lot of homes back here. There's a lot of families back here. And we want to keep it quiet. And it sounds to me that basically what I'm hearing tonight is that this building is debatable. But what's going to happen behind this building has already been kind of decided. Am I hearing that correctly? Yeah, that's what you're hearing correctly.
So anything that would happen, first off, the gate's not coming back open. And it's tough for me to say that because you may or may not trust me. But would never vote to open the gate, and I think it's now a life safety issue. A life safety issue from the PTS, or it only goes open for, like, we can't lock it off because the president comes or there needs to be emergency services out there. That's why it's gated.
Does that include Country Club Lane?
Does that include?
Country Club Lane, the other access road that's the city property?
Yes. So when a lot of the conversation around traffic arises, I definitely think that if there's a project that happens here, we have to figure out the traffic, especially around this side. What I'm confident around is that there's not going to be increased traffic in the Panaway neighborhood unless all your friends move here and they're driving over, which if it was me, I'd be walking over because I'd probably have a beer and I'd want to walk back, so not drive. And also the person that went 63, based on the fact that it's one way in, one way out, it's from, somewhere in this room is that person going 63 miles an hour. So
Or a guest, right?
Or a guest.
But it's the bottleneck in, it's not.
And this
We know they're
bottleneck
not gonna
in,
come
and
over.
so understanding what the bottleneck would be, traffic around, in and out, whether or not there's an ability to go onto Borthwick directly or not. To answer your second, and I think the bigger question, we're all, so there's 3,000 folks from Liberty Mutual that they've consolidated their jobs because they're all work from home. This used to be a school, and there was a little bit more traffic when it was a school than when it was a school for 25 children. But we are not decided on anything. That's the beauty of the civic process. And it's the beauty you could, vote everybody out. And that's the other thing. So this is we're here to listen to the neighborhood. Again, whatever happens with this project right here, we have to figure out. But I think the mention of open space in the back, that's something that, everything is on the table. Again, would like to see some form of housing, because we need it everywhere in the city, but appreciate the question. The council. No, because it's a republic. You know, you elect us. So unfortunately, what's that?
We elected you to be our voice.
Yep.
And we're giving you our voice.
And we're giving, so.
You're just listening to us. You're gonna do what you're gonna do.
I mean, you gotta give everyone.
Well, no, listen, hey, you know, listen, so I'll come over here, and, you know, I'd like us to be as civil as possible. Like, I'm a guy who likes to listen. I really wouldn't be in this job if I didn't want to make Portsmouth a great place to live. And so I want to listen. We all want to listen here. Going over here.
Hi neighbors, my name is Megan Corsetti. I live at 177 Colonial Drive, lifelong resident of Portsmouth. I love this city. I love Panaway even more. So I've been doing a lot of research and trying to understand what exactly it is that's being proposed here. So I do have a question for Mr. Welch. What exactly is the name of the tax credit or the grant that you are hoping to get approved for this proposal?
They're federal low-income housing tax credits, the LIHTC.
Okay, perfect. I read about it online.
And they're administered, they're federal credits, but they're administered through state housing finance agencies. So that's the New Hampshire Housing Finance.
Okay, perfect. So for my neighbors, I have been trying to read, it's about 55 pages written by a lawyer, so bear with me, I'm a nurse. But my understanding is that in part of this, there are stipulations in terms of the type of people that need to go into certain units. Percentages for people that would fall into the housing voucher category, as you guys put it on the website, on your PHA website, and for people that also might have severe mental illness, and then others. Another thing that I researched, and I'm going to call Laura with the low income housing tax credit program. She's the coordinator for that, so I will give her a call to answer more of my questions, because again, I don't know everything. But I did hear some of my neighbors kind of asking about, so the who was there, so that was something I wanted to share. I do think that there's a fair percentage that would go to the workforce housing, and I know that the mayor was kind enough to share with me what those salary ranges are. So about 50% of the occupants have to be making 80% or less than the median income. And so I want to make sure that we really understand who's coming here. I also have a question for you. I read all over PHA because I want to be understanding. I want to be making a sound decision. Why are we using this tax credit to build off of the Gosling Meadows project that you guys, the Chariot, I think is the name, I might be misremembering, but in 2016 there was this big presentation, and it seems like you stole a lot of the ideas from that presentation and planted them here. And it sounds like a great thing there because there is already kind of a mix of retail and there is a mix of housing, and it sounds like an amazing thing there because it's going to make it so those people in that neighborhood can have access to maybe more health care, that they can have access to new jobs, that they can have just a safer neighborhood. It seems like they were really trying to use that as an opportunity to improve the neighborhood there. And then hearing from my neighbors, we're feeling like putting a 4-story apartment building, which again, to educate myself, I drove by the West End Yards that this has been saying it's going to be like. I feel so small. These are single-family homes, most of them 875 square feet. They were built tiny, and they're amazing, and we love them. And a lot of people have done great things to their homes here, but I think it's important that we make sure we are covering all of our bases here. I don't want us to move too quickly, and to what Lauren said, you know, we can't move too quickly because once it's done and once the city signs over the keys and this property that's like $6 million or whatever it's worth, I don't know, but
it's gone, and we can never do anything with it. And I appreciate the counselors and the mayor being here and listening to us, but once you guys sign it over, it's up to you, Craig, and it's up to your team, and I don't know if I'm fully comfortable with that. I don't know. I think the PHA has done a lot of really great things, and I think that the idea in itself is a good one, but I think we need to slow down, and I think we need to really think about what makes the most sense. Because if somebody's going to walk to the closest post bus stop, they're going to have to go over our atrocious sidewalks on the front of Orchard Park. They're going to probably get almost run over at that corner because we tried to put a pedestrian sign, but cars knocked that over. I work at the hospital. I've thought about walking there, but then I go, well, I think I'd like to arrive to work alive today. So I think that's something that we and I appreciate this forum. I appreciate all the things that my neighbors have said. So many of you have asked the same questions that I've had. I wanted to share with you some of the research that I did, and I'll continue to share the research that I do because questions need to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Deaglan, Mayor. It's really not fair for me, as the chairman of the Portsmouth Housing Authority, to sit here and not, have Craig answer all the questions. He can answer more than I can, but I can tell you a few things. I've sat where Deaglan sits and where the city councilors have sat, and I sit where you are. I live in Elm Park. I've lived here my whole life. I'm related to plenty of you. This is exactly why the City Council has suggested this forum. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is exactly why the City Council has suggested this. And we, as the Portsmouth Housing Authority, completely support that. And we are very happy to hear your questions and concerns. One thing I can tell you, having been in public service of one sort and now being in another, is that Portsmouth Housing and Portsmouth Housing Authority has a variety of properties, and we're going to try to figure out the best way to do what we do in our community. We can only do that with the direction of the community, as embodied in the City Council. And I suspect after this evening, they're going to listen to you. So I think it's really important that you keep this coming. We need to make sure we give you information. The city needs to give you information. The Portsmouth Housing Authority needs to continue to give you information, because if you don't fully understand this and what it is we're proposing, none of us are going to make a good decision. So we appreciate your time and effort. We do not take for granted lightly any of the heartfelt opinions we've heard here, and they're singular, and we will continue to try and figure out how to do housing in Portsmouth, whether it's here or elsewhere. We're not a private developer. I don't get paid. This is a nonprofit. This is what we do. But the reason we do it is because we want our community to be better, and we've done it for 70 years. I appreciate your time, and I want to continue to listen.
Good evening. I'm going to offer somewhat an unpopular opinion, obviously, judging the room. My name's Ronnie Martinson. I live at 180 Sherburne Road. So it's the fourth house on the left after the bridge. You all want to come tar and feather me after this? But, I've lived in Portsmouth for 30 years. I was born in Portsmouth, spent my first 5 years in Portsmouth, moved to Rye, and have been back here, raised my kids here. And, 10 years ago, I probably would have had the same opinion as most of the people in this room, but the fact of the matter is the city's changed so much. We've become more exclusive rather than inclusive. We're pricing all our citizens out of this city. And I see this as an opportunity. I have 3 kids. They may want to work and live in this city. There's no way they're going to be able to do that. in the current climate. And in terms of whether it's workforce housing, affordable housing, low income, Section 8, you know what, unless they have lasers coming out of their eyes, we're talking about human beings at the end of the day. And I think what everyone needs to, you know, I appreciate everyone's stance. Is this, you know, like I just think Portsmouth needs affordable housing for our younger generation, for our older generation, and for people like me who might want to retire in 10 to 15 years, want to stay in Portsmouth. It'll be me and my wife, two individuals, and we'd probably fall into that income. You know, and I know I can sell my house today and make a lot of money, but I wouldn't be able to buy anywhere else. So I just urge everyone to think about it. I know the traffic could be impacted, but I'll be honest, 30 years here, I've never been stuck in Panaway Manor with the exception of when the bridge was being redone and they had the two-way light. The other thing is, in terms of the housing authorities, someone mentioned that none of the local communities have them. I can tell you I've been in the insurance restoration business for 30 years. And Dover has quite a large housing authority. I know York has a housing authority. Kittery has a housing authority. It's called the Navy Base. And, you know, we need to be inclusive of the people that want to be here. And I'd much rather have subsidized low-income Section 8 housing of people from Portsmouth rather than people coming in, like over at West End Yards and on Kate Street and everywhere else. They're coming from New York, they're coming from Connecticut, they're coming from Massachusetts. Let's keep some people in Portsmouth and build it right over here. Thank you.
My name is Cindy House, and I live at 82 Mason Avenue. The only thing I want to say is Liberty Mutual in Dover just closed their 2 buildings, and they're sending their people to Portsmouth. That's going to increase 3,100 people come to work here in Portsmouth. Traffic is going to be unbelievable.
Thanks, Cindy.
Hi, I'm Barbara Wheatcraft, and I live at 422 Sherburne Road. And we bought our house in 1979. Both of my daughters went to school in this school and have very fond memories of it. But everything changes. And I'm not here to say we should or we shouldn't do this, but I'm here to be concerned about how we do it. And I urge all the young people your age, because I'm running out of life, like Bill, to stay very involved. You know, I was one of the people that measured the distance from where you get off Route 95 to the front and the back gates when we were fighting to keep the back gate closed. So I've been there, I've done that, and it's your turn now. What I encourage you all to do is to make sure that whatever we do here in this neighborhood, and one of my friends who visited me once called it the Leave It to Beaver neighborhood, and I think that's appropriate, that you do it right. 4-story buildings are out of character with the Sherburne people. Just like some of the development downtown is out of character with downtown, and some of the monstrosities on Islington Street are out of character with what's around them. So let's urge people who are working on this to do it the right way. If we do end up with some housing, let's end up with housing that mirrors our neighborhood, that makes this an inclusive community. And I too would rather see people from Portsmouth here than people from New York, people from bringing in money, buying houses sight unseen. You know, it's our community. Let's keep it our community, and you young people can do that.
Back this way, all right. I'm coming.
And who has it impacted? Well, I can say it one day severely impacted me. There was a car accident on the bridge. Everyone was fine. However, the bus company calls me and they asked me to come pick up my child. My 8-year-old, heavily disabled child with low muscle tone, he has walking issues, he has severe autism, and he is a flight risk. I had to walk across the bridge through the crime scene, essentially, to get him off the bus and to walk him back through. You cannot help imagine how terrified that was for me and for him. He could have had a seizure from the flashing lights since he also has epilepsy. Luckily, he did not. So even though that was a rare instance, it was a very impactful instance. And many of the New Franklin teachers here know my son. They know him so well, they were kind enough to accommodate him to go to a special school because the New Franklin school could not accommodate his severe disability. So not only is our neighborhood not able to accommodate that my child would be able to go to public school currently in a safe way for them and him and the other children. Now I have to worry if I'm going to have to go walk across the bridge through more traffic to get to him. My other question for you all is, when we talk about affordable housing, and I looked at those numbers for what people were being charged for rent, and I thought, who are these people that can afford this? Because I can barely afford it. And I was very, very fortunate enough to get our home when we did. We were very lucky. I'm not confused by that at all. I can shout it from the rooftops. I love living at Gateway Manor. I wish everyone could live in such a beautiful community. It is absolutely filled with love, filled with pride, and filled with openness to people like my child. No one makes me feel weird when we walk down the street and my son is maybe rolling around on the ground. People applaud him, people cheer him on when he tries to ride his bike, which I had to put a jump rope across his chest so that he wouldn't ride into a car. Our neighborhood is safe right now for children like my son. The elderly community, it's safe for them to walk around. Please think about how this could long-term affect our safety before you do anything too fast. Thank you so much.
When I first read this post online article, watched the city council meeting, and then rewatched it, making sure that I was really grasping what was being proposed. Until now, I feel like we're getting some mixed messages and mixed proposals. So I guess I had a nice little thing to say here about being a mom of a 3-month-old and I have babysitter tonight. I'd rather be doing a couple of other things, but I'm here because I feel really passionate about what is being proposed, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, yeah, I have some worries about who my neighbors are going to be. I live on Greenland Road. We have a small dead-end road in a no-outlet neighborhood, and we moved in almost 5.5 years ago, and I've gotten to know each and every one of my neighbors because I plan to have my children feel safe, and I want to feel like I can have my kids play outside and walk to the neighborhood park. And I'm not suggesting that I will no longer feel that way. I just think that it's a legitimate question that we have. Who are our neighbors going to be? I can't possibly get to know, I don't think, if there are 80 units, maybe 160 or more people, like I am, I mean, we say that it's not a done deal, but yet at the city council meeting, it was said that this is an aggressive timeline, we're looking for an aggressive timeline, how can we help expedite this? So I just want to caution that there does seem to be, like, I have questions around that. I also know that some councilors have said there will not be any services or nonprofits, it will just be residential, but then other times it seems like that's not the case. So I think we need to be really clear and get these questions answered to make you feel a little bit more comfortable about what is coming in to our quiet, peaceful, well-lit neighborhood. I know people have brought about traffic. And Mr. Mayor, you said the height of the building, so that's great, but then also the picture or the plans that are presented, I just want to get some clarity around that because that also shows more buildings and kind of across where that open field is. So I guess I have a couple of questions and you can kind of tell my concerns around that. But I'm also a teacher and I know we can redistrict, but class size is really important. And no matter how we redistrict, the more people we're bringing in, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but that's going to impact class size. And as a teacher, I will say that that is one of the biggest factors that I personally think for student success. So I think we need to just be cautious about that and make sure that we're doing our research. But I guess some of my questions would be, would there ever be an egress, or will there definitely be an egress to Forthwith, at least a pedestrian one? Another question I have is about green space for residents if this goes through. And also, will there ever be a bus stop or bus station? I think it has to be a certain distance from, I could be wrong on that, a certain distance from a bus stop. So will that bus stop ever get moved onto Sherburne Road rather than Forthwith? If that pedestrian way can't be provided.
Thank you. Greg might be able to answer the simple one on the bus stop. It does, in order to qualify, be within walking distance. I would imagine all of this is, again, this is a process to listen to everyone, seemingly 75% that are, or 100% I would say are concerned. 75% say maybe no. But in terms of the details, that's where we have to work to see if it's something that can be viable and the neighbors can support. I think the thing that is probably disappointing is the feeling that you don't feel that we will listen. Yeah, well, so Peter, this is us listening, and I know, listen, it's how you act, and how, and how you respond, and this is the first crack at it. We had one meeting, it was 106 units, next meeting, top 100 units, I feel like there's a lot of listening that's already going on, and some of that might be, we're not doing it, but that's where, this is going to come back to the council and some of those details, but honestly, it's not the last meeting we're going to have at the Sherburne School, and unless we get, it has to be a little bit more warm reaction to the plans than, outright disdain around all of them. So, it's a process, and our goal is to make sure that we listen. That's what we're here for. My dad, Grace, he graduated to become a citizen of Portsmouth. And the citizen is literally the most important job. When I talk to my 6-year-old, when she grows up, she wants to be my boss, be a citizen. And you guys are showing tonight that you're the boss. And so I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, but there's a lot of detailed questions like that, like a bus stop move. I can't imagine we'd stick a bus stop on this entrance. That seems like, a traffic nightmare, like where's the bus stop going to turn around? So if we didn't get a walking path or an easement Borthwick for cars and pedestrians. Tough to imagine that this project would be green, but those are all the detailed questions that we're going to have to work through, and I appreciate everybody's moving. All right, we got another question. Talk until I hand you.
I can hold it.
Good evening. Aaron Garganta, 423 Colonial Drive. I'd like to thank all of my neighbors for coming out tonight. This is the most I have seen all of you together in one place, except at the annual neighborhood yard sale. So, thank you. What I'm hearing tonight, and what I am also in agreement with, is that many people feel that affordable or more affordable housing is definitely a need in Portsmouth. So I'm happy to see so many people in agreement and not just outright saying that they're against this because it is affordable housing. But I also hear many people are also in agreement that this project is not ready for prime time and to be permitted and approved on the timeline that you have already, you're looking for August. From a scale perspective, it's still too big, even at 80 to 100 units. From a design perspective, it's not in keeping with the design of the rest of the neighborhood. From a cost perspective, you don't know what it's going to cost and what you're going to get approved for how many units you're going to be able to build. And I'm personally uncomfortable letting you build on the back part of the property, only to come back in the future and tell us that this building needs to be torn down because it's not affordable to renovate. I'm born and raised in this neighborhood. I went to school here. I played soda pop basketball for the only team that wasn't soda. Lemon Tree. So, the city has done a good job keeping the building from falling down, but that's pretty much all they've done with the property over the last 30 years, is keep it from falling down. So, you know, the building needs a lot of work. To assume that you're going to be able to make it habitable for either living units or business units to the tune of 8 million, did I hear that somebody said this building needs? Not sure what that cost is going to be, but I don't know that there's a not-for-profit organization that's going to want to invest $8 million into an old school building for some offices. So I really think, I noticed on Craig's list that you had, design, permitting, and this year, construction in 2025, and the next project in 2026. I think this site is likely more appropriate for your next project in 2026. And I would propose that you maybe go look at the 4.5 acres of land to the left of the new community campus where there's a soccer field, basketball court, and a tennis court on a nice high-rise piece of land. Where you may not get the public outcry that you have right now, and you could probably build a 10-story building without much conflict from water country coming out and saying they don't want to see it there. But I seriously propose that because it's a greenfield site. It's got sewer, there's water out there, there's not elevation changes. One of the things you're going to have to contend with here is 4 years ago now, the city helped create a highway overlay district so we could all get approved for sound barriers out in our neighborhood. In order to build on this site, you have to do the necessary noise studies with engineered drawings and submit them to the city for approval to make sure that it brings the decibel levels in the proposed apartments down to a certain level. Now, that takes carefully designed drawings with materials that can be evaluated that will also impact the cost of your structure that you haven't designed yet, and other than sketches on a drawing. So that adds to my concern that this project is not ready for prime time because, again, it's costs that you haven't considered in the overall cost of the project. So I would request that you defer this site, continue to design it, bring things back to the neighborhood that we can review and comment on in terms of scale, appropriateness, impact with traffic studies, the sound studies that you're required to do for a variance, and then bring it back to this group of people so they can, be part of the process, give you feedback, get on board with what it is you're trying to propose, which I think a lot of people in this building want to see in Portsmouth. And I think you might find that there are people here that are more willing to get on the side of the city and the PHA to execute the project. A couple of other quick questions that I have is I believe that other towns in our seacoast should have a little bit more skin in the game with providing affordable housing. And I'm not sure, Craig, if there's anything in your organization structure that prevents you from building affordable housing units in Greenland or in Newington, other than a general unwillingness for those towns to have affordable housing in their towns. Because if you Google affordable housing in Greenland or affordable housing in Newington, it points them to all your properties. So there is no affordable housing advertised in either of those two towns. And they contribute to a large amount of businesses in the area. And I think it would just be something that maybe the city could approach our neighbor towns and find out if it's possible for the PHA to develop projects in their towns and still run them as the PHA. Just one of my questions. The other was, I'm not sure how this financial agreement works, but does the PHA actually purchase this piece of property from the town and the town sees that money go back into its general fund, or is the city bringing this property to the table and offering it to the PHA?
Answer.
The city gives the property to the PHA. And so that there is a valuation on the tax rolls of $3.5 million, which we will then not collect taxes on, but we won't get additional money back for the development, but it's something that's part of the consideration. I was just curious what the financial arrangement was. It sounds like it's more like the Lafayette School where we're the ground leaseholder and you build the property and something to that effect. Yeah, so that's all I have. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Sorry. If anybody would like to run for the Sherburne Civic Association president and/or run the National Night Out or yard sale annually, please come see me after this meeting. Safety volunteers.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Cammie Saunders, and I live at 406 Greenside Avenue. And just a question regarding the services portion of what I saw during the first presentation. It looked like the working with Haven and Gather, both services, was pretty far along, and that they also had money that they had to spend, grant money, $2 million or something from Haven, and the food pantry, and they were really keen to be involved in this project. And that seemed like that was a lot further along too than just these plans. So I'm just curious what the situation is with that.
I can answer. So Haven and I believe Gather both approached the city, learning that this building would be. There's not the word is disposition of the building, but it seems weird to say dispose, but it would be moved off from the city. They both were interested in moving their operations within here. That's an ask. To Peter's point, it's other. Anybody can make that ask. That is not. It's not a part right now of that. But I say not right now because it could be, because anything could be. But it's not something that the PHA is working alongside Haven and Gather to propose a site here. I know that's confusing because there's a lot of folks that came to City Hall and spoke in favor of of taking us down that path and looking at that. But that was during public comment, and so not a approved, not saying that it couldn't happen or we don't need the services of those organizations, because we do in the city of Portsmouth. But that's not something that it's not something that is included today. And so that's what they would like it to be. So that's maybe why it's confusing. Not to say that it's not needed, but again, that's why we're listening.
Okay. When you brought up the picture of the condo, not condos, the units, there was a building to the front which had parking spaces, it was not part of the residential building. What building was that?
Put it back up there and you'll see. What
So,
building is that?
so I think those would be townhomes. Yeah, this is townhomes, like just not a apartment complex. So townhomes there. But again, there's a So 160, well, I can't speak for Craig right now, but it seems like that ship has sailed, 160. From 80 to 100 units, we would work, if this would happen, work with the community to find out what was most aesthetically pleasing and allowed us to build the most affordable housing on this property. But again, to the larger questions around here, it seems like there's a lot more questions that have to be before we start measuring the drapes on, townhomes or whatnot that would go here.
Mike O'Connell. I live in Hawley. I grew up in Portsmouth. I think we have to consider, and it's been said a few times, but the green space aspect. I've got the distinct privilege of working on the Little League board. I get to make the practice schedule for 25 teams, and I have to reach out to Newington and Greenland and other towns to be able to find practice space for all the kids that want to play baseball. And when there's flag football, when there's other sports, there's soccer, there's lacrosse, these outdoor sporting events, there's nowhere to go. So when I see a baseball field behind the school that I bring my son to practice and to think it won't be there, or some level of a green space to have practices and games, it kills me, because the struggle is immense to try to figure out how and who you're going to have in a space with who to have these sporting events. And our community is growing. There's a lot of kids. We talked about the schools oversized. There's too many kids in the schools at the moment. Now we're going to have not enough space to have these sporting events. I think we really need to consider that from this property.
Okay, before the third bite at the apple, I'm going to go to this.
Craig, are you aware of what's going on at McEachern and the other apartments?
I'll give you the microphone right after this question.
A question that may not seem relevant, but I'm basically if I were here tonight, if I was here tonight and we were at City Hall and I was here with one of my developers asking me to build 3 or 4 four-story buildings, it's not a yes or no question. Would it even be considered? Are we considering this because it's the city pushing it?
If we're considering building on
That high, those 4-story buildings, packing in this corner, adding, and I don't know the Liberty part, I don't know for how long people will be working at home versus when they come back. Are we ready to add 1,000 cars a day into this little section of our building? No. Thought that I had from the beginning is, has anybody talked to anybody in the city, talked to the police department about additional coverage if this did go through and their distance to here? Has anybody talked to the police department about the ability to possibly build a new station here? It's get rid of the mold and make them nice. I'm a lot against workforce housing. I've probably spent about 300 or 400 hours of my life working on workforce housing projects. Those that have gone through within 5 years, not all, many have been a disaster. The buildings are put up cheaply, they start falling apart, nobody maintains them, they try to sell them. And the bigger problem to that is workforce. I know we had some figures up here, and I don't just mean to pick on the police department, but what is our assurance that brand new police officers coming into town can afford to live here? Firefighters, EMT, nurse, teachers, everybody. I'm not picking on the police department, but they need a place. Is there any discussion about that? They've put up with that building for a long time, and somebody's going to end up with a medical issue being based out of that building at some point. They deserve it. Why not here?
Did you have your question? Is it about this project or is it about?
So, Chris Welch, you're talking, Craig, C, Chris, tomato. You're talking about Section 8 housing that you never say no to it, right? Is that what you just, when I asked you that question, you said if someone applies to these units and they are eligible for Section 8 housing, I believe you stated that you would not.
Into the mic.
Oh, sorry. That you would not define, that you would not turn them down. Thank you. Is that correct? Okay, so.
The director of the Portsmouth Housing Authority, we would never discriminate against
So,
anybody. Right.
The senior housing and the roof housing also is part of your program, correct? Are you aware of some of the atrocities that happen in those buildings? Can you just answer that? Are you aware of some of the things that goes on? And can you bring? Listen, let me finish my question. Because I'm asking that question only.
Most other people like myself file the same way because I don't want to live in this project. Not for nothing. It seems like it's being forced down our throats and there's nothing we can do about it. So, and I'd also like to know if it was your organization that approached my neighbor about purchasing this house to demolish it to make your project even bigger. And if so, who's going to pay for that? The city and us as taxpayers, or you as PHA?
One of the first things I did when we started talking to Steve and Maureen, and I told them about the project.
I'm sorry, what was the... Let me say this, I won't speak, I think Steve Maureen are here, they can speak for themselves about the conversations that we've had. Yeah. Right. Right. When you're developing real estate, just like we did downtown, similar to that, it's often advantageous for things like, could be for things like traffic, and parking impact or anything like that. It's often advantageous to own a budding property, no matter what it is. A lot of times that, what they call an assemblage, you end up putting together a couple of lots. If there were abutters that were sellers, when you're trying to do development like this, it very often does make sense to purchase a budding property in order to develop housing or whatever.
We just found out about this a week ago. It's unbelievable.
Right. There's a strong sense in this building like this is being pushed down everybody's throat. It is. So, and then it's right. So we're in a position that we don't have all of the information because we haven't studied it, but this is a part of that process, right? So the input that everybody really wants is tonight, and this is not an insincere attempt to appease the neighborhood. This is to listen to people about what the highest and best use of this site is for. I was asked to evaluate it as a housing site. It's an outstanding housing site as far as the way we look at it, and the way we look at it is that we're in the middle of a housing crisis, as you point out. So, I don't know if that answers your entire question, but
Craig,
yes.
Craig, you made a question. So, I'm going to go over.
So I live at 34 Mason. My husband's at home with our 3-year-old son. I'm really pregnant with another baby. My question to you is, have you ever been stuck trying to get out past towards the traffic circle? Who's trying to get out because it backs up? So again, when you're talking even 20 or 40 more units in there, and I can't get out as it is now through that direction. I don't know what happened. They also done work on the light going to 95. I have sat through 3 cycles where it doesn't let me turn to get on 95. It doesn't recognize my car there, and I'm stuck there, and I've seen several people run the red light. Because they're stuck, they can't get out. What are you supposed to do? And now you're proposing more housing and more people to try and funnel through there, when you already have people from Liberty with Mutual coming in, as well as the hospital staff that are trying to leave. It just all congests. So it's not just the traffic specifically in our road, in that little cross section. It's also to the main service differences that aren't being met as it is now. And it's a safety concern. I don't like sitting in a red light with my son in the back screaming bloody murder, only for me to feel like my only option is to run a red light. It's not safe.
I'll take it first, and then and then any other councilors happy to pass around. I think that's a good question. I would say that everybody in this room believes that there is a need for housing somewhere in Portsmouth. Universally, I think we can all agree on that. I think what you're feeling is the same thing my neighborhood would feel, correct? If we were to put, 40, 50, 100 units in Franklin. Like I can guarantee that this room would be filled with people in Portsmouth, with people in the Christian Shore asking the same exact questions that everyone here in this room is asking. And I'm here to say that is completely expected and understandable that you have a ton of concerns around the timeline of this, around the size of this, and all of those concerns in my mind are valid. So Laura's question, I don't think we're aligned to the timeline that we're going to get to August on. We do, I'm the city council. So there's the city council makes the decision based on what we have to dispose of, or we have to transfer the building in terms of a lease to be able to say, hey, this is something that we can do. They would have to apply by August, which means, and unfortunately, the amount of effort that goes into alignment plans that are very questions answered. All of that's privately funded by them.
What's the harm, right?
So here's, the only harm in terms of waiting is that we continue to need housing so another year. But that's the harm is that that's what it comes down to. We don't build it this year. We can look at it next year. I think Aaron had a good point. Did Aaron leave? Well, you tell Aaron that I told him that he had a good point in terms of looking at taking these plans and looking at other areas. This is the one that was on the table because of the fact that the Sherburne was being moved out of and into the community campus. But no, I think that there is a lot of effort that needs to go into it. And,
money and resources are going to go into another application for a separate place?
Uh,
How much money, time, effort are going to be used by the PHA, the same way they hire engineers or architects?
Sure,
So this thing, but it's too spoiled, because right now, it's the only option. That's the only option.
Peter, I'm not saying that. And there's plenty of options thrown out tonight. Community campus being one of them. Sorry. There's not a. So it's difficult to have a Peter and me conversation. We definitely should have a conversation. I would say that to Lauren's question, whether or not this is ready to go right now, it's not. Go by August, for me, doesn't necessitate that it's not ready to go ever. And we have to look at that from the standpoint of all of the needs of Portsmouth, and would like this much passion to come out to the next meeting that we have, and we come back with better designs and more information. I trust that you will. So I'm going to let Greg or Charlie, you want to take a stab at it?
As the rec department, we're going to use a softball field. The girls have nowhere to play. You drive the peas to play on that. It's like going to the other side of the earth. It doesn't feel like it's part of the city of Portsmouth anymore. PDA is the PDA. Portsmouth is Portsmouth. That's a girls softball field that we all helped put in. People volunteered. There's a lot of community in it. But if nothing else, there's girls in this city that need to have a place to play softball. Everybody can play on the field.
I would say that all of these questions that we raised in terms of other folks looking at the property, when we look at the property, our priority, it has been a single focus. And I would say that it has been a singular focus to bring less than market rate housing to Portsmouth. That has been a singular focus to me. One of the best feelings I've ever had being there was when, a kid that I played baseball with, his dad was a coach, walked up to me and said, I got in. And I asked him, what did you get into? He said, Ruth Griffin Apartments. That a kid that could grow up here, that worked for the city, that could live and stay in the city is really important to me. We can't require developers. What's that? Yeah, I know. But this is, so we started somewhere. We're looking at where we are right now. We're looking at, we've heard from the community that this is too much for this community as it's currently constructed. I would say that's a universal feeling here. Hey, I'm gonna let Dawn talk for a second.
Hi, sir.
You got it, guys. Speaking in that microphone.
Donna Gardner, Colonial Drive.
You got it. What's perfect?
Do you have a minimum number of units that would make it financially viable to do it?
The way the federal low-income housing tax credit program works is it works in a way that makes most of the housing projects like this in New Hampshire end up around 40 units. When we say 80 units, we could apply for tax credits in 2 different phases. So I think a minimally viable project is around 40 units. They told me that we should have 40 units downtown. That would have been the easiest thing to do. We thought we only own one piece of land. We've got one shot at doing it. There's a huge need for housing. And so we asked for variances and stuff to be able to get 60.
Your buildings are higher.
Right.
The second question is, we've been doing well testing all over the neighborhood. And we all know there's a plume of contamination underground. So I'm concerned about our water. And I look at the building all over the city and think of our waste treatment plant at Pierce Island. How much can you cram into small spaces and still expect everybody to absorb the cost? Because that would be on the taxpayer.
Yeah. Thanks, Donna. It's the question of growth. It's being mayor is a great job. The pay could be a little better, but it's a great job because you're entrusted with being a representative of the city. And as a kid that grew up here, it's literally probably the coolest thing that I could do. My daughter looks at me like, she thinks that I could snap my fingers and make anything happen. So it's not the truth. But the next step. Yep, so I think the next step is to come back to the council with direction to PHA on whether or not this project as currently constructed is an application that we're going to look for in August, or is it an application that we're going to punt to the following August. Or there's guidance to look elsewhere, but it's definitely reasonable to look elsewhere, but we own property in the city. If we do not build below market rate housing on that property, nobody's coming. The cavalry is not coming. In the state of New Hampshire, we have no ability to require any part of affordability in any building whatsoever. But per state law, we're not allowed to say, hey, developer X, put in 20% affordable housing. Doesn't happen. And let me just finish. If that doesn't happen, if we continue to only allow high-end luxury condos because that's all we can allow, I am afraid of the type of community that our children will inherit. It will not be the diversity that we had growing up. I know it's not what anybody's saying here.
All land that is developed. What is developed? That's true. It's not water.
They
I'm
all-
not saying no,
This property is already owned by the city.
Yep, so-
It costed $8 million to renovate this culture, maybe put another school. That's why I'm gonna say, I work here, they said, we've done lots of investigation. But what
Yeah, and so, guys, let's yell at me instead of each other. Just yell at me. Just keep the comments and yell at me instead of one another. So, question here.
Hi, my name is Richard. I live in 278 Sherman Road, and I got a good-sized piece of land in the neighborhood. And on my property, I have set that from the town that would not allow me to build or park cars in a certain part of my yard because of environmental impact. So if this gets built, what's going to stop me from, say, subdividing my lawn and building stuff back there? And I actually drove here, before the cars here, I parked past my house to walk here. So, I'm not close where I have environmental impact on my own property to keep me from doing stuff. And you're suggesting what you're suggesting, this doesn't line up, then I've got to issue the town my own personal property. And what I can do.
Thank you. I asked for this type of meeting at the work session, that this was initially, had saw some light of day. And I guess I'll say thank you for creating this opportunity.
Is the housing crisis that we have in Portsmouth. I would agree with most of the speakers tonight that the timeline is too aggressive. My name is Councilor Andrew Bagley. So what I've heard from some of the people talking tonight, say that there is a building built and it's 40 units, but it fits the character of the neighborhood. If firefighters live there, would you be okay with it?
I think it's difficult to. I think it's hard to.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, in this city, if you're a school teacher, if you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, if you're a nurse, unless you have family wealth or you've inherited a place to stay, it's not feasible for you to live in our city anymore because it's gotten too expensive. Well, most of us haven't. All right.
Okay, before this, so there's two. Hey guys, so again, any others that is that a question or is it?